My alcoholic sister blamed me for our father's death at his own funeral and slapped me in front of everyone, until I revealed she'd been stealing his heart medication money. Her husband was so disgusted he served her divorce papers at the cemetery. The crowd's reaction was everything. Well, let me tell you something. My name is Aria Adams and I'm 24 years old. Nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened at my father's funeral last Tuesday. I was standing there in my black dress, the one Daddy bought me for my college graduation just 2 years ago. The funeral home smelled like lilies and grief, that heavy, suffocating combination that seems to cling to your clothes for weeks afterward. 200 people had come to pay their respects to Eduardo Adams, the man who'd raised 3 kids on a construction worker's salary and never missed a single parent-teacher conference. The mahogany casket sat at the front of the room, surrounded by flowers that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. I was trying to hold myself together, thinking about how proud Daddy would be seeing all these people who loved him, when I heard the clicking of heels behind me. Well. Look who decided to show up, came that familiar voice, slurred and bitter. I turned around to see my older sister Julie, 28 years old and reeking of vodka at 10 in the morning. Her husband Mark stood behind her, his face already showing signs of embarrassment as he tried to steady her swaying form. "Julie, please," I whispered, glancing around at the mourners. "Not here. Not today." But the look in her bloodshot eyes told me this conversation was far from over. "Not here. Not here." Julie's voice rose to a level that made heads turn throughout the funeral home. "You got some nerve, little sister. Some real nerve." Mark placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Baby, maybe we should." "Don't you baby me, Mark." She shrugged him off so violently that she stumbled. This little princess here needs to hear some truth for once in her spoiled life. My chest tightened. I could see Mrs. Henderson from next door turning in her chair, her eyebrows raised. Cousin Adrian stopped mid-conversation with Uncle Robert, both of them staring at us with wide eyes. "Julie, you're drunk," I said quietly, trying to de-escalate. "Let's go outside, Anne." "I'm drunk." She let out a harsh laugh that echoed off the walls. "You killed him, Arya. You hear me? You killed our daddy with your selfishness." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face as whispers started rippling through the crowd. Someone's phone came up and I realized with horror that people were starting to record. "What are you talking about?" I managed to choke out. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Running off to that fancy college, leaving Daddy here to worry himself sick about you. All those late-night phone calls when you needed money, all that stress you put on his heart." My hands started shaking. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. Stress. I found my voice, though it came out stronger than I felt. "Julie, I called Daddy twice a week. I came home every holiday. I worked 2 jobs to pay my own tuition." "Liar." The word exploded from her lips and I saw Mark's face go pale behind her. "You think I don't know about all that money he sent you? The money he should have been using for his heart medication?" My mouth fell open. "What money?" "Julie, I never took money from Daddy's medication fund. Never." But even as I said it, a cold realization was creeping up my spine. All those times Daddy had seemed tired when I called. All those months when he'd said he was feeling fine, baby girl. Don't you worry about your old man. "Oh, you're good," Julie sneered, swaying dangerously on her high heels. "Real good at playing innocent. But I know the truth. The truth." My voice was getting louder now and I didn't care who heard. "You want to talk about truth? Let's talk about why Mark's been calling me at midnight for the past 6 months, asking if I've heard from you. Let's talk about why Daddy had to change his bank account password 3 times this year." I saw Mark's eyes widen in shock. He hadn't told her about those phone calls. Julie's face contorted with rage and I knew I'd hit a nerve. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The slap came so fast and so hard that I didn't even see it coming. My head snapped to the side, my ear ringing from the impact. Gasps echoed throughout the funeral home as 200 people witnessed my sister strike me across the face right in front of our father's casket. "You worthless parasite," she screamed, her voice raw and primal. "This is all your fault, he's dead." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every eye in the room on us, could hear the soft sounds of people shifting in their chairs, the subtle beeping of phones recording this nightmare. My cheek burned where her ring had caught the skin and I could taste blood on my lip. "Julie." Mark's voice was barely a whisper, but I caught the horror in it. Don't you dare defend her. Julie whirled around to face her husband, and for the first time I saw him flinch. She killed him, Mark. She stressed him out so much with her college demands and her fancy dreams that his heart just gave up. Mrs. Washington, who'd taught us both in Sunday school, stood up from her seat. Child, you need to calm yourself. This is not the time or place. Shut up. Julie screamed at the elderly woman. All of you just shut up. You don't know what this family has been through because of her. I watched Mark's face transform in real time. The embarrassment was fading, replaced by something that looked like disgust. His jaw tightened as his wife continued her tirade, and I saw him take a small step backward. You want to know what this family's been through? I finally found my voice, and it came out steady and clear despite the chaos. Let's tell everyone about the $3,000 that went missing from Daddy's medical emergency fund last Christmas. Julie's face went ashen. Mark's head snapped toward his wife so fast I was surprised he didn't get whiplash. Let's tell them about how Daddy had to skip his cardiologist appointments for 2 months because someone drained his health savings account. My voice was getting stronger now, fed by righteous anger. Let's tell them about the credit cards that got maxed out buying designer purses and wine club memberships. You don't know what you're talking about, Julie hissed, but her voice had lost its conviction. I know exactly what I'm talking about, I shot back. Because Daddy called me crying at 2 a.m. 6 months ago, asking if I knew why his bank account was empty. He was too proud to say it outright, but he knew, Julie. He knew it was you. Mark was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. The crowd had gone completely silent, everyone straining to hear every word. I worked double shifts at the campus bookstore to send Daddy $20 a week for his medications. I continued, my voice breaking slightly. $20 a week while you were buying $100 bottles of wine and gambling away his retirement money. The funeral director, a tall man named Mr. Peterson, was slowly making his way toward us from the back of the room. Is that true? Mark's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the pin-drop silence of the funeral home, everyone heard him. Julie turned to her husband, and for a moment, I saw fear flicker across her features. Mark, baby, you don't understand. Is it true? He repeated, and this time his voice carried the weight of a man who already knew the answer. I borrowed some money, okay? It was just temporary. I was going to pay it back when... When what, Julie? Mark's voice was getting stronger. When were you going to pay back the money you stole from a sick man? Your own father. The word, stole, hung in the air like a death sentence. I saw several people in the crowd nod their heads, pieces of a puzzle they didn't even know existed suddenly clicking into place. Don't you dare judge me. Julie screamed, pointing a shaking finger at her husband. I've been taking care of this family while Miss Perfect here was off playing college girl. Taking care of this family? Mark's laugh was bitter and hollow. Is that what you call drinking yourself unconscious every night? Is that what you call screaming at the neighbors until the police show up? My heart stopped. Police. When had the police been involved? Mr. Peterson had finally reached our small group, his face professional but firm. I'm going to have to ask you folks to take this outside. But Mark wasn't finished. No, she needs to hear this. Mark, don't, Julie pleaded, but there was desperation in her voice now. She needs to know that your father called me 3 months ago, Mark said, his eyes locked on mine. He called me at work asking if I could help him get you into rehab. He was worried you were going to drink yourself to death and he didn't know what to do. The funeral home felt like it was spinning around me. Daddy called you? He loved you, Julie, Mark continued, his voice breaking. Even after everything you put him through, he loved you. But he was terrified. You crashed your car into Mrs. Johnson's mailbox and didn't even remember doing it. You called in bomb threats to Arias University because you were mad that she got a scholarship. Bomb threats? I gasped. She what? Mrs. Henderson stood up from her seat, her hand over her heart. That's enough. Mr. Peterson stepped forward, his voice authoritative. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is completely inappropriate. But Julie wasn't done. With a primal scream that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, she lunged for me again. You ruined everything. Everything was fine before you left. Mark caught her around the waist, pulling her back before she could reach me. Julie, stop. Please just stop. Let me go, she thrashed against her husband's grip. She needs to pay for what she did. It was then that I saw it. The exact moment Mark's love for his wife died. His face went completely blank, and when he looked at her, there was nothing there. No anger, no hurt, no disappointment. Just nothing. Mark's grip on Julie loosened and she stumbled forward, catching herself on the back of a folding chair. The elderly woman sitting in it, Mrs. Patterson from Daddy's work, looked up at her with a mixture of pity and fear. "Don't touch me," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, pulling her purse closer to her chest. That simple statement seemed to break something in Mark. He looked around the room at all the faces staring at him, with horror and judgment, and I watched him realize that his wife had just turned him into a laughingstock in front of his dead father-in-law and 200 witnesses. "Security," Mr. Peterson called out, and two men in dark suits started making their way through the crowd. "You don't have to call security," Mark said, his voice hollow. "We're leaving." "We?" Julie spun around to face him. "What do you mean we?" "I'm not going anywhere. This is my father's funeral." "No," Mark said simply. "It was your father's funeral. Now it's just a circus and I won't be a part of it anymore." The finality in his voice made even Julie pause. She looked at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time in months, maybe years. "Mark, baby, don't." He held up his hand to stop her. "Just don't." I watched my brother-in-law, this good man who'd tried for 3 years to save his wife from herself, walk away from everything he'd been fighting for. He moved through the crowd with his head down, ignoring the whispers and stares. Julie stood there for a moment, swaying slightly before reality seemed to hit her. "Mark. Mark." Julie's voice cracked as she called after her husband, but he didn't turn around. He kept walking until he disappeared through the heavy oak doors of the funeral home. The security guards reached us just as Julie tried to run after him, her high heels clicking frantically against the polished floor. One of them, a kind-faced man with gray hair, gently took her by the arm. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me." "Get your hands off me." She jerked away from him but stumbled and nearly fell. "This is my father's funeral. You can't make me leave my father's funeral." "Actually, we can," Mr. Peterson said firmly. "And we are. You've disrupted this service long enough." I looked around the room at the faces of everyone who'd come to honor my father. Some looked horrified, others looked angry, and a few looked like they were still processing what they'd just witnessed. Mrs. Washington had her arm around Mrs. Henderson, both of them shaking their heads in disbelief. "Arya," Julie turned to me, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the sister I used to know. The one who taught me how to braid my hair and snuck me extra cookies from Grandma's jar. "Arya, please. Don't let them do this to me." But as I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw what everyone else in that room saw. A woman who'd been so consumed by her own pain and addiction that she'd forgotten how to be human. A woman who'd just blamed her innocent sister for their father's death while standing over his dead body. "I can't help you anymore," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, but I can't." The security guards escorted her out while she screamed obscenities that I won't repeat. The silence that followed Julie's removal was heavy and awkward. 200 people sat in their folding chairs, not sure what to do or say. The funeral director cleared his throat and announced that we would take a brief recess before continuing with the service. I stood there beside Daddy's casket, my cheeks still stinging from the slap, and felt completely alone. Uncle Robert approached me first, his weathered face creased with concern. "Baby girl, you okay?" he asked, reaching out to examine the red mark on my face. "I'm fine, Uncle Robert," I lied, because what else could I say? That my sister had just publicly accused me of killing our father? That she'd been stealing from him while I was working myself to death to help pay for his medical bills? "That girl's been troubled for a long time," Mrs. Washington said, appearing at my other side. "Your daddy knew it too. He used to ask us to pray for her every Sunday after service." "He did. I hadn't known that. Child, he was so worried about her. But he was proud of you. So proud. He used to brag about his baby girl in college, how you were going to be the first in the family to get your degree." Tears started flowing then, and I couldn't stop them. All those nights I'd stayed up studying, all those double shifts at the bookstore, all those times I'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner so I could send Daddy money for his medications. It had all been worth it because he was proud of me. "She's sick," someone behind me said. I turned to see Mark's mother, a woman I'd only met a handful of times at family gatherings. Mrs. Harper, I said, surprised to see her. That wasn't your sister in there, she continued. That was the disease talking. 2 hours later we were at the cemetery. The service had continued after Julie was removed, and it was beautiful. Exactly what Daddy would have wanted. People shared stories about his kindness, his work ethic, his devotion to his family. By the time we lowered his casket into the ground, I felt like I'd been able to say goodbye properly. The crowd at the graveside was smaller. Maybe 50 people who'd stayed for the burial. I was standing beside the fresh mound of dirt, clutching the single white rose I'd planned to leave on Daddy's grave, when I saw a familiar figure approaching. Mark walked toward me slowly, his eyes red-rimmed and his suit wrinkled. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 2 hours. "Arya," he said quietly when he reached me. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I nodded and we walked a few steps away from the crowd. The afternoon sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery grounds. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have stopped her sooner. I should have gotten her help months ago. Mark, this isn't your fault." "Yes, it is." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "I've been planning this for weeks. I filed these papers this morning before the funeral even started." My hands shook as I took the envelope from him. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," he said simply. "I can't do it anymore, Arya. I can't watch her destroy herself and everyone around her." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers and saw the official documents inside. "I loved her," Mark said, tears streaming down his face. "God help me, I loved her so much. But seeing her attack you today at your father's funeral, that wasn't the woman I married. That wasn't even human." I folded the papers carefully and handed the envelope back to him. "Mark, you don't have to explain this to me. I understand." "No, you don't," he said, shaking his head. "There's more. Things you need to know." My heart started racing. What else could there possibly be? "The money she took from your father, it was more than $3,000. She's been forging checks using his credit cards, even took out a loan in his name. The total is close to $15,000. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. $15,000. That was more than Daddy made in 6 months. "That's not all," Mark continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's been calling your school, trying to get you kicked out. She told them you were cheating, that you were using drugs. They investigated, but obviously found nothing. What? She couldn't stand that you were succeeding while she was failing. Every time you called with good news about a grade or an internship, she would go into a rage. She said you were showing off, rubbing her failures in her face." I thought about all those times I'd excitedly called home to share my achievements, only to have Julie cut the conversation short or find excuses to get off the phone. "Your father knew," Mark said. "He knew everything. And he was protecting you from it." As Mark walked away with those divorce papers, I stood in that cemetery and felt something I hadn't expected: relief. Not because my sister's marriage was ending, but because finally, the truth was out. I placed my white rose on Daddy's grave and whispered, "I'm sorry you had to carry this burden alone. But I promise you I'm going to make you proud." 6 months later, I graduated summa cum laude with my degree in social work. At the ceremony, I looked out into the crowd and saw Uncle Robert, Mrs. Washington, and even Mr. Peterson from the funeral home, all there to cheer me on. Mark sent me a card that simply said, "Your father would be so proud. Congratulations on becoming the woman he always knew you could be." Julie never reached out to me after the funeral. I heard through family that she'd entered rehab, though I don't know if she completed the program. Part of me hopes she found the help she needed, but I've learned that I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I work now with families dealing with addiction, helping them navigate the complex emotions of loving someone who's sick while protecting themselves from that person's destructive behavior. Every day I think about Daddy and how he tried to shield me from Julie's illness, even at the cost of his own health and happiness. The scar on my cheek from Julie's ring faded within a few weeks, but the lesson from that day will stay with me forever. Sometimes loving someone means accepting that you can't fix them, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. My name is Arya Adams, I'm 25 years old now, and I am not responsible for anyone's choices but my own. The whole thing still feels surreal. Part of me can't believe it got this far, but here we are. Honestly, do you think they left me any other choice?